Everyone's autistic or ADHD these days. Everybody wants a label.
You know, back in my day, we didn't really have all this ADHD stuff.
Why does everyone want to label themselves?
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Neurodivergent. My name's Jen, and on this channel, I make content about being a female diagnosed with autism and ADHD. If by everyone wants a label you mean I was trying to make sense of my life, then yeah, sure, I guess I was looking for a label. Today we're going to be talking about people using the word label and the meanings behind it. I realize this is a pretty loaded subject, but here I am, jumping into the shark-infested waters like an idiot. Thanks a lot, ADHD. According to the English dictionary, label can be used as a verb or a noun. When used as a verb, it means to assign to a category especially inaccurately or restrictively. When used as a noun, it is a classifying phrase or name applied to a person or thing, especially one that is inaccurate or restrictive. Look, I bestow upon you all of this knowledge free of charge. Granted, you could have Googled that yourself, also free of charge, but I saved you the trouble. You're welcome. The way I see it, I see this term used in at least three ways. The first is to imply that diagnoses are being handed out like candy. The second is out of ignorance when it is used as a synonym for diagnosis. And the third is to dismiss or invalidate someone's struggles, and we're going to get into all three. First, let's look at the way it's being used to imply that diagnoses are being handed out like beads at a Mardi Gras parade. I had an epiphany while I was thinking about what I wanted to say in this video. What if autism and ADHD are more common than people realize? I completely understand the temptation to think we should limit this diagnosis and gatekeep who gets in. But what if these different neotypes are as common as, let's say, different blood types? Just think about that for a moment. According to the CDC, about 1% of the population has autism. I personally think that number is underrepresented because there are tons of people who don't get diagnosed. But even so, if we use that figure, about 1% of the population also has AB- blood type. If someone told you they had AB- blood type, you wouldn't roll your eyes and say, oh my gosh, there can't be that many people with AB- blood type, because there are. There's evidence to suggest that autism and ADHD may have had certain survival benefits, so there's probably reasons why it wasn't eliminated by natural selection. Systemizing processes and tools, heightened perceptions, seeking novelty and exploration, all added unique advantages to our survival. Granted, some of those ADHDers may have been running off cliffs or picking fights with jaguars, but the ones that survived had a lot to offer. So what if we are everywhere? What if we're in your neighborhoods, your schools, your churches, and your places of employment? We might be hiding under your bed right now. So rather than thinking about this being something rare that we need to gatekeep with all of our strength, maybe we come to a level of acceptance that neurodiversity is no more uncommon a part of the human spectrum than different blood types. What if we just said, oh yeah, that person has autism, instead of, oh yeah, that person has autism? Now let's look at the second way I've seen this word used, which is out of ignorance as a synonym for diagnosis. You often hear people say, don't limit yourself with a label, but a diagnosis isn't a label, it's a description or an identification. And in that regard, why would describing something about yourself be limiting? Does sharing this thing about yourself strip away everything else about you and reduce you to just that one thing? I can be described as a mom, but that doesn't strip me of my entire identity. I don't stay locked up in my house with every waking moment revolving around my son. I'm also a wife, a mother, a sister, an entrepreneur, and a friend. I'm creative, clumsy, an overthinker, and a daydreamer. I'm a lot of things. But for some reason, people think you're boxing yourself in and restricting yourself if you tell them you have autism or ADHD. That is a huge, gigantic, and inseparable part of who I am because it's literally how my brain works. But it's not all that I am. In other words, that label can't predict or define all of my characteristics. I choose to believe that people are well-intentioned when they say this, though. I think what they're trying to say is you shouldn't demean yourself and that you are smart, capable, and can overcome your deficits. But what people don't realize is that acknowledging strengths and weaknesses isn't demeaning. It's empowering. One of my all-time favorite quotes is one by Albert Einstein when he said, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life thinking that it is stupid. I have a news flash for everyone that may not be so new or flashy, But every person alive has strengths and weaknesses. Through neurological identification, we can begin to hone in on our strengths instead of dedicating too much time to trying to change our weaknesses. It frees us from that prison of beating ourselves up for the ways we differ from society. When someone tells a neurotypical person they were diagnosed with ADHD or autism, they're usually met with, "I'm sorry." Whereas a neurodivergent person will pat you on the back and say, "Congratulations," because they know how much freedom there is in understanding that you're not a crap human being, but that there are words to describe why you have certain struggles. I also see well-intentioned parents confusing the words diagnosis and label. So, using it in that context, parents fear that labeling their children will diminish their opportunities to get good jobs or to get into colleges, or that it could even go so far as to affect their constitutional rights or freedoms later on in life. As I noted in my introductory video, my husband's first reaction to our son's teacher's suspicions of autism was that giving him a label would ruin his chances of getting into college. Was that because he was a bad or mean parent? Absolutely not. It came from a place of love and wanting the best for our son. And that's where most of these parents are coming from, just wanting the best for their kids. I remember communicating my own fears to one of my employees about giving my son a label in the early stages of his diagnosis. My concerns were slightly different from my husband's. I was worried that giving him this label would be enabling, encouraging laziness, or coddling. I worried it would make him feel like a victim and that he wouldn't want to push hard to see his full potential. These were the beginning stages of our journey, you guys. I'm just being honest with you about the process. Anyway, she said something profound that became the catalyst to changing how I looked at our son's diagnosis. She said that identifying his needs wasn't coddling and it wasn't taking opportunities away from him. It is instead giving him the tools he needs so that he can reach his full potential. I viewed his accommodations as bad things, but viewing them as tools helped me to see things in a whole new light. Parents also fear that giving their children a label will invite bullying, but the reality is your child is already different from their peers, and they see it. At least with an explanation, there's more of a chance for understanding and compassion. I won't say always, because we all know that some kids will be tiny little heads no matter what, but I think there is at least a better chance than with no explanation at all. The consequences of not giving your children the help and tools they need could have far more detrimental consequences. And third, let's look at how people use this word as a means of invalidation. Some people think that people only use a diagnosis to be victims or to seek attention. And here I come in swinging with the controversy, but as a community, we can't say this never happens if the rest of us want to be taken seriously. Acknowledging this fact doesn't mean that you do this or that everyone does this. In fact, that's the stigma I'm trying to dispel. But while I acknowledge this possibility, I also don't think there are a ton of bad actors out there knowingly doing this, like on purpose. As the saying goes, you shouldn't attribute to malice what can be attributed to ignorance. A lot of people might actually have something going on, but they might just be slightly off course in their conclusions, but that doesn't mean that they're doing it intentionally or to seek attention. It doesn't mean that they're not, but it doesn't mean that they are. Other people think individuals use their diagnosis to excuse bad behavior or to avoid accountability, but there's a difference between people who have to work harder to overcome deficits and those who use it to excuse bad behaviors. People who have to work harder to overcome deficits are just working with the hand they were dealt. Anyone with certain neurological or health issues may have to work harder in some areas than others. Someone with PCOS, for example, might have to work harder to lose weight than someone who doesn't have PCOS. And on the outside, they will likely get judged because people think it is solely a result of personal choice. They can't see what's going on the inside of their bodies. While personal choices still play a role, they are at a disadvantage that makes it harder for them. Likewise, people on the spectrum have many areas of struggle that are genuine explanations of deficits or why we act so differently to our peers. People with ADHD exert twice as much effort to do basic tasks that others find easy. And I will never be able to wave a magic wand to make social interactions not be exhausting anymore, nor will I ever become an expert at small talk. No matter how much effort I exert, I will still have people accusing me of being stuck up or weird because I struggle in social situations. There is no amount of pull yourself up by your bootstraps that can make that not be a thing for me. Why? Because neurodiversity is not just a set of personality quirks that we can eradicate. It is how our brains are wired and is encoded into our very being. But unfortunately, many people view neurodiversity as behavioral and not neurological. So just like the example of the person with a PCOS, we often get judged because people think our actions are solely a result of personal choice. They can't see what's going on the inside. We definitely have deficits and struggles that others don't have, but we still have to be responsible and accountable where we can be. Everyone who is human has the capacity to challenge themselves to pursue personal growth and development where possible. Finally, a lot of people confuse developmental disorders with mental health disorders, and since many view mental health disorders as a direct result of poor choices, it's easy to see how one can think it is just a label that you can put on and take off whenever you want. But unlike mental health disorders like anxiety or depression, developmental disorders cannot start in adulthood and don't vary in duration. Things like autism and ADHD usually have a pretty large genetic component and are usually diagnosed or at least present prior to the age of 18, and they're lifelong. But because people confuse the two, you can see how this adds to the stigma that developmental disorders are behavioral, not neurological. If you are the partner or a loved one of someone who has autism or ADHD, mix discernment with compassion so that you don't sweep all of your loved one's behaviors under this umbrella of being lazy, seeking attention, making it up, or making excuses. Here are a few things to keep in mind. Autism and ADHD are hardwired, not acquired. As such, these issues are present from birth and present in early childhood, and it is lifelong. People can't just assume this quote-unquote label later in life. When I did my first 4 videos, I went out of my way to share specific stories with you about the traits I had way before the word autism ever even made an appearance on my radar. I wanted people to realize these weren't traits I made up after the idea was introduced to me. I haven't even gotten to the videos about my childhood traits yet. I wanted to get a few videos out there that weren't all about me first. I'm still a newer channel, and I didn't want people to get the wrong impression that this channel is gonna just be where I talk about myself all the time. Marsha! My point is, I didn't acquire this diagnosis like a label. It's important to see where your loved one is trying. They might communicate areas that are just too hard for them to change, or where they need to set personal boundaries that require more patience and understanding from you. But are they also communicating areas where they can improve, and are they asking for help? Do you see them taking accountability and trying their best? I ask my husband for help all the time where I need it. Just the other day, I asked him to pick up our Turo rental vehicle from the guest because I was out of spoons to socialize. But then I offered to take the car and clean it. Cleaning was the more time-consuming and labor-intensive activity, but I didn't mind that because it didn't involve any socializing. I asked for help where I really needed it, and in return, I did what I was capable of doing. I tell my husband about appointments I have so that he can help keep me on track, but I still do my best to try to set calendar reminders and timers to be responsible. At the end of the day, life is full of so-called labels. I think it might have been Paul Micallef who said something along the lines of, if they don't label me as autistic, they would have labeled me with something else, like lazy, awkward, rude, shy, or quirky. I could be wrong on who said that, but I just didn't want to take the credit for it. Anyway, let me know what you think. What do you think of the term label? Have you ever had anyone tell you not to label yourself, or that you were just looking for attention? And as always, I invite you to share your own stories with me. How have you learned to leverage your strengths and where to ask for help with your deficits? I welcome this or anything you want to get off your chest about having autism or ADHD. You can submit your thoughts in the comments below, or if you're open to me sharing your story anonymously or with your first name in a future video, you can submit that through my website, neurodivergent.com. So I'm labeling that the end of this video for now.
Well, that was cheesy. I'm sorry.
And hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now. Mwah!